Hello and welcome back to the Heart of Truth podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Erin Kelly, and I have a lot to share with you today. So I'm coming at you with a solo episode as I have been in Mexico for the last 3 weeks, and I have so much I would like to share about my experience here because it has been one of deep reclamation and completion because of past experiences that I had living here before. And I have gone deeper into the grids, and wow, there is just so much energetically here. And people talk a lot about the Mexico Magico. And I will just plant the seed now that it is not all about the light magic, okay? So we're going to get into that. But as you may have seen from the title, there is so much that I want to address because there's been a lot happening in the collective as well. So depending on what I actually title it, because it was so long, we're going to get into the death of the Pope that just occurred yesterday, Easter slash Ostera slash Resurrection Day, and the rise of the Christ Sophia, because this is really the palpable energy that I have been connecting with and feeling on the light side of things. And this is the whole point of it, right? And then, I am now currently in San Miguel de Allende. So the Archangel Michael distortions have been really coming to the fore as well. And then we have the space cadets and the other headlines that have all been coming out, and then the dark crystal. So, how does that all connect? If you're not familiar with that Netflix movie series, I think it might be actually, this is really all coming together. And what it's about is the fall of black magic and the dark agendas as the Christ Sophia rises. So, if you're new here, I am a dot connector. Those who have been with me or who have read my book will know that. And the thing with dot connecting is it allows us to recognize the pattern. A pattern emerges when you begin to connect the dots. So, this skill or capacity or tool, whatever you want to look at it as, of pattern recognition is so useful in these times as things seem to be more and more chaotic, increasingly scattered and discordant. So, what is really going on behind the scenes? What is the energy behind all of this chaos and turmoil in the collective? Is it all connected? Well, the way I perceive it, yes, it absolutely is. So we're going to get into the women, quote unquote, flying into moon, going into space, not really to the moon, and the Pope dying, and the news coming out that for many of us, we already knew this, that, the COVID lockdowns were all a lie. It was based on lies. How is that all connecting? This COVID curfew was not based on health advice per se. A lot of us knew that. A lot of us knew that. But what is it really about? So it's really signifying a deeper rumbling in the collective consciousness as our consciousness is awakening to the greater truth of the divinity that we have been separated from. That is a lot in itself, but in essence, many of us are feeling the stirring within our hearts and this opening of our minds, this expanding of our consciousness that things are not as we have been led to believe, that we have been told they are, that history itself may be completely inaccurate or fabricated or distorted his story, right? Written by the victors. So, who are the controllers of this time? And how does this connect to randomness like the women going into space? Why wasn't that received well, right? Why weren't people celebrating women's empowerment? Well, because we knew deep down that there was some distortion in it, that it wasn't truly about female empowerment. I mean, literally, the rocket looked like a phallus. It looked like straight out of Austin Powers. The joke is on us. The world is a stage for those who actually believe that this was about women's empowerment. And I do feel for the woman, I believe her name was also Amanda, who it was always her dream to become an astronaut. And she was overshadowed by the ridiculous figures of Katy Perry and what is her name? Gail something or other. I can't even remember her name. This is how little I actually pay attention. Gail King, maybe? I don't know. I could be getting that completely wrong. But why weren't more women celebrating this? Why weren't people saying, yeah, girls, you rock, woman power? No, because it was a show. It was a facade. It was so superficial and surface level. And the way that it was portrayed just seemed actually demeaning, quite the opposite of empowering. So that's one example. They went up in a phallus shaped ship, and it was a mockery truly of feminine power and true feminine achievement to say, oh, they took a ride into space. Yes, they did take a ride. Maybe a couple of them had done some training, and that's amazing, but they were not real astronauts who dedicated their lives to this. So no, I'm sorry. You took a ride into space. Cool. That's amazing for you. But it's not the achievement that it has been portrayed to be. So this does not serve the feminine. As the divine feminine rises within us, we are perceiving and recognizing these distortions of false female empowerment, of false feminism. Feminism itself is completely distorted, in my humble opinion. I do address that in my book, but we're not going to get deep into that. So we are recognizing this as the hierarchical system begins to crumble. And this the systems of control, the old hierarchy, as represented very much so by Catholicism, by the papacy, you cannot make that up. The Pope dying the day after Easter. Now, I cannot profess to know very much about this particular Pope. I know he was a Jesuit. I know some people loved him. I know some people hated him. I don't even know all the reasons why. I know surface level because, again, I do not pay attention to talking heads and figures and quote unquote celebrities and stars who are really there to be a distraction and a distortion. I don't pay too much attention to them. I look at it from more the systemic perspective of what and who they represent. And the Pope is the figurehead of the Catholic religion and how much distortion lies and resides within Catholicism and even the Jesuit heritage. I actually went to a Jesuit college, Boston College. And I had an amazing time there. I am not trying to knock my experience there whatsoever, but it's an interesting connection that I feel is woven in because we also then, in the last decade or a couple decades, I don't remember exactly the time frame of when all of this emerged, but the truth about all of the pedophilia in the Catholic Church. So we have to get really honest with ourselves about what these systems and structures and these figureheads actually represent. So this is the crux of where I am going with this episode as the true divine Christ, the true divine Sophia rises. It is also contributing to the fall of false institutions. Anything based in illusion is crumbling. And we can perceive energetically, if nothing else, that much of these systems were based on illusion. So to recognize that anything based in fear and separation is illusion, not truth, that is the guiding ethos of our time, in my humble opinion. The awakening is the recognition of a higher guiding truth or a deeper truth that resides within our hearts and souls, that remembrance that is being resurrected from within. Talking now again about the rise and the resurrection of the Christ Sophia. I wrote a blog post about this on Saturday evening going into Easter, and it just felt very potent. The energy that wanted to come through the words, that wanted to flow through me. I really just was feeling this anchoring in of a deeper truth, this simultaneous resurrection of the remembrance that we contain within. So that is the divine Christ that represents truth being anchored in, but also the divine essence of the Sophia resurrecting in remembrance from within the grid, from within our hearts and souls and bones and blood, from within our DNA itself. So we hold this remembrance. And then it's the merging of the divine masculine and the divine feminine that brings us into our wholeness, our holiness. And from that space of wholeness, remembering our wholeness, remembering our holiness, we cannot be manipulated. That's very interesting. The word manipulated was escaping my mind. It's like that's not even going to be part of our reality. The manipulation is dying. So the false feminine that was represented by the women going to the moon, quote unquote, not really, but that's the moon matrix, the lunar feminine that operates in distortion. There is an organic moon, but the organic essence was taken over and captured, much like the organic crystalline grids of the earth were taken over and distorted. So, to get into both Mexico and the Dark Crystal. So I haven't even watched too much of the Dark Crystal. I think there are, now that I'm thinking about it, it's a multi-episode series, and I'm only a little bit into episode 1. But it's very, very poignant in the allegory that it presents to us that I believe is actually disclosure of the true history of humanity and what happened on Earth. I think that there is a lot there based on what I know and based on what I have seen in this show. I think it's actually quite fascinating. But in essence, what happens is there are these beautiful tribes of beings that are guardians of their planet. It's kind of like an Earth planet. And these different races, tribes is probably the best word. They all have their own role on the planet. But these invaders come in and they take over, telling them that they will protect this sacred crystal of truth. It's literally the crystal of truth. And these invaders come in under the guise of being the lords and protectors of this crystal. So they take over that role. But what they're really doing behind the scenes as people worship them and give them tithes, kind of like the Catholic Church, are you catching my drift? Is they are siphoning, they are stealing the essence from the crystal itself, and then the crystal stops giving, and then it reverses, and so it starts siphoning, and they concoct a plan. And again, I'm only partway in. Concoct a plan to siphon not just from the essence of the people using the crystal, but from the essence of the indigenous tribes, of the people who were the true guardians, the original guardians. So it was this life-giving crystal, this life-giving crystalline essence of truth that was sourcing and resourcing in perpetuity the people and the land. And then as soon as the reversal went in, the land became corrupted. The food that was growing in the land became corrupted. And I'm not, what's the word? I'm not saying too much because I can't think of that word. Spoiler alert. No, it's not too much of a spoiler because I literally have only seen the beginning. But this is the foundation of what it's sharing with us. And this is exactly what I feel is connected to the grids here on our planet Earth. So the dark crystal, the crystal of truth, becomes the dark crystal because it becomes distorted and corrupted. So what I feel has happened is there is this organic crystalline essence in our earth as well. The crystalline grid of Gaia, the ley lines, the dragon lines, the crystalline core of her heart that is pure and Sophianic. And it's just this incredible essence that I have been tapping into as well. And I will connect this to my arrival in Tulum in a moment. But she has been distorted. Her essence has been siphoned from, and the grid itself has been completely corrupted, inverted, and distorted. I have talked about the inverted matrix. And rather than this equal giving and receiving, it has been this pillaging of the sacred divinity, of the essence of the earth and her crystalline core and her crystalline grids. So the grid itself has anchored this in. And so the people, us, the humans, we in turn have become distorted because we have also then been siphoned from. So it's distorting everything, and it's causing us to then operate in fear rather than love, rather than generosity. We are now operating in greed and corruption. And I say we collectively because probably everybody listening to this is at a certain level of consciousness already that we recognize that this is what is happening. But I just see these connections coming through so palpably as I was feeling this rise of the Christ Sophia in tandem in Hierogamous union, holy union for Easter, and then the Pope dies the next day, you can't make that up. And when you look at the Vatican itself, it looks like a snake, a reptile, den of snakes. And then you see them wearing their black robes with the red band around the waist. What does that represent to you? To me, that represents more of a demonic consciousness. And in fact, I believe that people who are, most of the population has been deceived, tithing to this entity that is siphoning off the population, that is not a true God of love. It is an entity, an egregore that is actually demonic in essence. The God of the Old Testament in particular is not light. It's really quite obvious when you allow yourself to take a step back and recognize that these lords, that these priests, that these figureheads are not operating in light. They are siphoning off the population, the controllers of our reality, the ones who want to shape our perception of reality, the politicians, the media, the pharma reps in particular. Everything is distorted and it's siphoning our health. It's siphoning our life force financially through the 9 to 5 corporate nonsense. You know, we have to earn a living to survive, and then we have to pay just to eat, right? That's really not how the world was designed to be. The planet was originally meant to operate. It was supposed to be an equal give and take of the guardians and the divine essence of the Sophianic source, giving life and abundance and fruits to the humans, to her children, and entirely regenerative in her own right, right? But then things came in and distorted and siphoned and pillaged, and we just keep taking and taking and taking and taking the gold, the oil, the gems, the jewels, just more, and it's all being siphoned to a very tiny percentage of the population, the so-called elite. But are they really elite? The lords that are, siphoning from the true humans and guardians, the indigenous populations that are not just of certain continents, but of every continent. We can then get into the Europeans that preceded the Catholic religion. There were many indigenous tribes, to use, for lack of a better term, indigenous tribes that were very earth-based, land-based, that were working in tandem. They were working with the healing essence. Ooh, I just got a gust of wind coming through. And yes, they were genocided. In essence, that is the truth of what happened. And their life force, it was basically blood ritual, blood sacrifice that got anchored into the land. We can look at the Celtics in particular as representative of what happens when this demonic consciousness took over and started pillaging the people and the land herself. And yes, it's quite dark. So these dark agendas and the black magic that is rooted in satanic blood ritual and sacrifice, just to be really direct, that's really the consciousness that has been operating the church itself. If we get really honest with ourselves, the Holy Roman Empire is not so holy. It was complete distortion and inversion of a higher guiding truth, of divinity, of love, of unity, of Christ consciousness. It was about the controllers having control of the population. And so, as the true Christ and the true Sophianic essence is being restored and resurrected, the Pope dies. The figurehead of this distorted demonic institution dies. This is huge. This is really huge. And now, to get into my own experience, landing in Tulum on April 1st, it is now the 22nd as I record. It is Earth Day, the resurrection of the Sophia, and that is exactly what I felt. But to feel that, I actually had to clear a lot of dark energy. And as soon as the plane began its final descent into Tulum over the jungle, I started to feel nauseous. I started purging energetically. For those who don't know, often burping is a sign of purging. And I never feel nauseous, and I don't experience that hardly ever. Hardly ever do I experience that level of purging. And I felt so off when I was moving through the airport. And it turned out that there was a lot of stuff that attached to me. And fortunately, I know how to clear this stuff, like implants and dark harnesses and things like this. So I had to go through, and I went through my process. Fortunately, my friend owns a spa in Tulum, and so I was at the spa clearing, anchoring, grounding, and I really had to focus so intently on clearing because I couldn't focus. My brain was just foggy and it felt trapped. And that was like the harness energy. And so I was clearing, clearing, clearing. And finally, the one line that was escaping me, I was like, I know I'm missing something because there is a process that I go through. I also try to tune in. But the one line that was escaping me was about the black magic, witchery, I always say that, witchcraft and sorcery and the hexes, spells, incantations, all of that. That is what I couldn't think of because that is what was anchored in Tulum in particular. People talk about the Tulum magic, and I believe that it could be that it's pure false light magic, but I also believe that due to the polarities of our experience of this reality, the more light there is, the more distortion has been placed on it. So I believe Mexico holds a lot of magic. And because of that, a huge amount of black magic and distortion has been placed over the land. It's almost like if you can imagine a web, like a net of darkness, of black goo, of residue, kind of this stickiness underneath the crust that is suppressing the true crystalline organic essence underneath. So it's like I had to move through that muck and anchor all the way into the core. And once I cleared the goo, the residue, the muck, the web, the black web, and the web that was preventing me from seeing and perceiving clearly what it was, as soon as I did that, I was anchored into the most beautiful Sophianic essence, this beautiful aqualine, turquoise, rose essence, this plasmic, crystalline, iridescent essence that was residing in the core, that resides in the core, and that I felt was flowing up. This is often something I connect with, but it felt even more potent and more true, like she herself was beginning to resurrect because we had seen very clearly what was anchored in that land itself. A lot of darkness, a lot of distortion, a lot of blood ritual sacrifice has been done in that region itself, the Yucatan. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't perceive that. But within the community itself, there are a lot of false shamans, and false gurus and false teachers. A lot of false light energy lives in Tulum. And I say that from experience because I used to live there. And I have talked about talking about my experience a few times, and it never felt quite right because I feel I did have to return to Tulum. I was there for a solid 2 weeks and reclaim and bring personal completion to that whole entire experience by going back to the land and reclaiming the magic, the true magic that I feel is buried or has been buried, and to unlock it within myself and the land itself. And I did see the person that attempted to ruin my life, and I was able to move through it. And I didn't have any direct interaction with her, but and perhaps this is a whole episode. It really should be a whole episode because this is a very deep and serious subject, the false light. And I have touched on this before, of course, but to get into more specifics about it. But this person put a siphon in my womb, an energetic siphon, and the womb of women who hold the Sophianic essence, the true divine union codes, the Christ codes, the true starseed essence. Many of us have been targeted specifically in our wombs, and I had hired her to do the opposite. I had hired her to do a psychic surgery, and there was this curse placed on my womb that I had learned about, but it was a curse that was actually a form of protection to keep my magic contained so I could kind of walk through the world with an invisibility cloak and be less targeted because I have been targeted. My soul has been targeted in many lifetimes because of the codes that I carry. And I am not alone in this. Many, many light workers, starseeds, healers, empaths carry similar codes and have experienced similar experiences. So there's narcissistic abuse, and then there's straight up black magic targeting that happens as well. And yeah, it's really that dark, unfortunately. And this is what I think is coming to light now collectively. I think people are maybe not quite ready for it, but it's necessary to finally acknowledge the truth of our reality and the truth of those who have been controlling our reality. They have been doing so through ritual, through witchcraft, through black magic and blood magic and sacrifice and really, really dark stuff. And this is how it's been anchored in, is through the grids, through the land, through the war and the bloodshed and the sacrifice itself, which we know for a fact that was something in the Mayan times. And they touted it as an honor that people wanted to do that, but that was part of the distortion itself, that after the fall of consciousness that came through Atlantis, which is what I really think the dark crystal is telling us, how the original falls of consciousness occurred, is through the crystalline grid itself and the siphoning of the true essence of the humans that have kept us trapped here and bound and siphoned from. So I had one placed in my womb in this lifetime, and she then turned around and accused me of doing it to her after a lot of gaslighting, and it was unbeknownst to me for quite some time after the accusal happened. And behind the scenes, there was a lot of attack going on, psychic attack and things like that, beyond the straight up abuse and gaslighting that had happened up until I blocked her. And then it was a full year later that I learned the full truth. And multiple people saw the same thing, that in fact there was this, multiple healers that I connected with, there was this siphon in my womb space. And I was, part of me wanting to believe that she herself may have been targeted and she was a minion, if you will, a vessel that this darker consciousness was working through, because that's how it works, right? That's still how it works. But it does seem that really nothing has changed and she is as dark as ever. And she's very good at masking, but her light isn't her own. And so that is part of this black magic that has taken over because they're very good at masking, and they will speak up against other people and say, oh, that person is dark, that person is dark, and accusing left and right. And so this is why I'm really cautious to use names. But I go back and forth because sometimes I feel that it is important to speak truth, but then people will then question me. And I just don't think that's really going to serve in the long run. Part of me wanted to actually have a conversation and say, hey, this is my side of it and what actually happened. Because maybe you actually believe this other version of this story because you had this thing in you. And it turns out, and there's physical evidence that there is something distorting her perception inside of her brain. Let's just put it that way. And at the end of the day, when I was in Tulum, I could much feel the distortions and how it was very much anchored into the grid. And I was also seeing the original beauty of the land. I was able to experience the magic of it again. And then I came to San Miguel de Allende. So San Miguel, Saint Michael, Archangel Michael. De Allende. Allende, I think, is it Ignacio Allende or something, was the name of the liberator. So San Miguel de Allende is where the Mexican War of Independence was originally seated. And apparently, what I just learned is that this war went on for 300 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody did share this with me because and it's somebody I had just kind of casually met in Tulum and followed on Instagram, that kind of thing. And he commented, he was like, I can't stay there for more than 3 days. And I know you're very energetically in tune, but I just feel so bad after 3 days because of all of the heavy energy anchored in to this region. And I thought that was really interesting because my first couple days here were very, very rough. I did not have a good time the first couple days I landed in San Miguel de Allende, even though it's a beautiful city and I do genuinely love it. And I am in the most beautiful situation. I am currently looking out, hearing the birds, but looking out over a garden on the side of an old extinct volcano, actually, very interestingly. Looking out over the valley, the mountains in the distance, although it's a little hazy today, and the kind of, it's a small city, colonial city over there. And then it's a lake slash maybe a reservoir over there. It's a beautiful view. And behind my house, the ridge goes up, and I hiked up the other day, and I was really feeling a lot of the heaviness. I had to do deep clearing of the land, but I was really feeling into the false Archangel Michael matrix that has been placed on the land, on the people, on our consciousness as well, because there is the solar Christ Michael versus the warrior Archangel Michael. And a lot of people who connect with Archangel Michael are connecting with this false AI clone version of the true solar Christ Michael, who was kind of trapped, if you will. So it's all really tying together. It's all really fascinating for sure. And if you're following along with me, awesome. Thank you. Because there's a lot going on here, a lot of details that all have coalesced for this episode. I did not anticipate talking about all these different things for this episode, but I couldn't deny the web that was being woven, the tapestry that was being woven, that all of these pieces of the both the dark and the light were coming together as the light is being resurrected just after Easter, recording this, and the dark web is essentially dissolving, disintegrating, crumbling, collapsing. It's the collapsing of the old hierarchy that we are witnessing and experiencing, and thus the chaos and the distractions of the media. But actually, it's all connected, and disclosure is telling us the truth of how our planet has been controlled for so long through the distortions of the grids and these false matrices that have us worshiping false deities and connecting with false entities like the not true Archangel Michael. So this could be triggering. And if it's triggering for people, you probably haven't lasted this long anyway. But there is so much depth to the darkness that is bubbling to the surface. And there are grid workers and light workers that have been working hard for years energetically to clear the darkness within, to clear the shadows within, to help clear the grid of the planet through our vessel as the bridge, as the rainbow bridge. By clearing out the distortions in our chakras, we become the rainbow itself. That is what the rainbow bridge is in the way I view it. And this is allowing Christ consciousness and the cosmic Christ, which has this rainbow aura, this golden rainbow essence, to really not just anchor, but then blossom as well from within. And then it's this Sophianic essence that is rising, her crystalline plasma diamond essence that is being resurrected in tandem. And now I want to get into a little bit more Mary Magdalene as the Sophianic counterpart to the Christ, to Jesus the Christ. She was the embodiment of the Sophia and the Sophianic essence being resurrected as well. So I'm going to take a quick sip of water. But Mary Magdalene, she is often depicted as holding a red egg. And so that is often associated with the egg of Easter, of Ostara, the original high holy day that it was celebrated by the indigenous traditions as we can connect back to that narrative that I was beginning to weave in. So Sophia represents wisdom, and the stone, that the red egg that she is holding, is meant to actually be the philosopher's stone. And so when we break down the word philosopher, philo, is it philo? It means love. And then Soph is the root of Sophia, wisdom. And or is like aura, but it's basically philosopher, the lover of wisdom. So the philosopher's stone is meant to be the fourth stage of alchemy, and the reddening represents the color of alchemical gold, apparently, which is really interesting. So red was the traditional color of the sun, so that represents the solar aspects, the egg of life, the origins of life. So the holy grail that she represents is also the living elixir, her womb as the holder of this essence. So the Sophianic womb has been targeted for eons. We're talking many millennia. This is not a new story that we have been targeted in this lifetime. This has been going on for many millennia, far back before Mary Magdalene herself as well. She is one embodiment of the Sophia. And so she represents also the solar grail queens. So this essence that I was feeling was the resurrection of the Christ, as well as the resurrection of the Sophia and the return of the Christos King, the Christos solar kings and solar grail queens in tandem, coming together for holy union. So the resurrection story is not just about the rise of Christ. It is about the power and devotion of the feminine counterpart, the Sophia, who was embodied by Mary Magdalene herself. So it is not just about the resurrection story of a moment in time that changed history 2,000 years ago. It is about us now living this resurrection. So she was a witnesser. She was a rememberer as well. She resurrected her own light body so that he, the Christ, her counterpart, could fully embody the Christos himself. She was the vessel, the conduit, the portal for him to fully become who he came here to be. Without her, he wouldn't have been able to fully resurrect, because actually the resurrection is part of the feminine mysteries. Going back even further, we have the goddesses Ishtar, Inanna, and the stories that they represent are resurrection, going into the underworld for 3 days to be resurrected whole and holy, complete unto themselves. So they descend to remember who they truly are. This is the goddess tradition in action. It is not actually one of the masculine Christ codes. Resurrection is a feminine tradition, and we all hold the masculine and the feminine within. So at the time when Jesus Christ incarnated, Yeshua incarnated, and Mary Magdalene herself incarnated, we were at a very low collective level of consciousness, and these mystery school traditions contained the seeds of wisdom that were required for these truths, these greater truths, to be continued in hiding. So a lot of the wisdom was hidden so that it could be retained within our souls, within our encoded DNA memories as well, so it wouldn't be entirely lost. And again, this is why the bloodlines, the lineages, the wombs have been so targeted. It is as practical as targeting the physical vessel of divinity, because they wanted to desecrate the lineages of those who held these DNA codes. So Yeshua incarnated to be a wayshower, anchoring in the blueprint for Christ consciousness onto the planet, whereas Mary Magdalene incarnated as the divine feminine counterpart to the Christ, as the embodiment of this sacred Sophia essence. So she walked the path of love in devotion for all of us to follow. So those of us incarnated now who resonate as the divine feminine, we are here to walk that way of love, of beauty, of devotion, and simultaneously to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, the way of mastery. So the way of mastery is that masculine essence of truth. And then the path of love, the way of devotion and beauty, is the feminine essence. And together they merge in Hyros Gamis, inner union, for us to resurrect the wholeness, the holiness within. So we may be embodied in more of the divine feminine or more of the divine masculine in this incarnation. However, we all contain both energies. And the goal, the task, is to come into true inner union, which honestly is a tall order. The path of mastery is a tall order. We don't call them ascended masters for nothing. So when we call it mastery, know that mastery is really calling us to go into the depths, to really work with both the feminine and the masculine aspects. There is no bypassing. There is no turning a blind eye to the darkness when you walk this path of mastery. They faced the darkness head on. They faced the persecution and crucifixion head on. And through that process, which was a targeting, but also an alchemization of the darkness, through that, we were able to witness what was possible for us. You will do greater things than me. Also, the kingdom of heaven resides within, remembering that divinity within and remembering the power of our miraculous angelic template that we hold so that we can resurrect the light body within ourselves as well. You will do greater things than me. And we remember that by clearing out our vessel, by facing the sins, if you will, and integrating them and alchemizing them and recognizing that it is not divine to hold shame, but to alchemize that shame because it is one of the lowest frequencies. If we can alchemize the shame for what we have been perceived as and told that we are sinners, that we incarnated here as inadequate beings, that need a redeemer and a savior outside of ourselves to be redeemed, if we can move through that and recognize the true teachings of the Christ and the Sophia, then we can transcend end the trance of the illusion that we have been operating in that is based in hierarchy and control. So Pisces, the age of Pisces, was very much about seeking outside of ourselves, seeking a savior, seeking something or someone to operate for us, if you will, as the mediator, as the conduit. And the age of Aquarius is about that direct reception of the divine knowing. So it's the water bearer pouring the water into our minds and hearts, the eternal life water, the elixir of life, if you will, pouring directly into our hearts and our minds to clear our perception and to help us know the truth from within. So this is very much inner gnosis. And the Gnostics were very connected to the Sophia as well. So Aquarius follows Pisces in the zodiac. We are now in the age of Aquarius, according to most anyway. And the water bearer, the purpose is the awakening. So the fish fed the flock, whereas the water bearer is one that awakens and helps the flock to remember that we can feed ourselves. So we are transcending the externalized belief, that longing for a savior, and that separation consciousness that we are separate from the divine, while Aquarius pours the sustenance of life directly into our heart mind through that direct revelation and direct communion with God. So there is no longer a need for the middleman, for the temple, for the gatekeepers of wisdom. There is no longer a need to trust the experts because, as it has been made quite clear to those of us who are not operating in denial, the experts are not to be trusted. The experts have created this separation of truth, and they're not operating in truth. So the Gospel of Thomas, saying 13, so this is not from the original text. Jesus said, I am not your master, for you have drunk and have become drunk from the bubbling spring which I have caused to gush forth. So this spring is the eternal spring of life, of truth, of inner gnosis, the truth from within that is bubbling because we have drunk from the source of truth, from the source of life that is the Christ essence, that is a frequency of consciousness that we all contain within. It is not reserved for one soul or one particular group of souls. It is available to us all. We only have to choose the path. Some people believe that there is a group of chosen ones who came here to help resurrect this remembrance. Possibly there are a group of select souls, but I also believe that the chosen ones are the ones who choose themselves to take the step forward and to become the light, to resurrect the light within, to help others remember that they too have the light, that they all have this possibility within themselves. Now, some souls may choose to continue evolving on a different timeline or on a different planet even, whatever you might believe in. But those of us who came here to remember, to evolve our consciousness, are beginning to anchor this truth into the collective consciousness. And it is undeniable now that this is happening, that the systems of power and hierarchy constructed by the fallen masculine that represent that dark crystal consciousness of the overlords, they are crumbling. So the tentacles of control and manipulation of the dark mother as well, that is a distortion of the Sophia, they are shriveling. So think about the evil queens, of the Disney stories like Maleficent and Ursula, the Sea Witch. They're very much very real representations of that dark feminine consciousness that is manipulative, that will use black magic to distort, to siphon, to control, and to gaslight, and to desecrate the true Sophianic essence. We have confronted a lot of attack, those of us who hold these codes. And it is time for us to rise and to reclaim our power. And that is very much what my journey in the last few weeks has been. It is about the reclamation. It is about the completion of that timeline. It's like I had to go back to the land. And it was a little bit minorly triggering to see that individual. Our eyes didn't lock, thank God. But I literally wound up right next to her at one point. I felt very protected at that time. Um, and then I turned and I realized who it was, and I immediately did a 180 and walked away. So that was kind of interesting. But the empath wants to see the good in everyone, but we've got to learn boundaries. And yes, compassion and forgiveness, but we've got to also recognize that we need to speak our truth, to speak truth out into the world, to reclaim our voices, to reclaim our power, to reclaim our essence, which is that of truth, which is love. The truth of love, the sword of truth, is one of the aspects of this podcast itself, moving into the heart of truth. The sword wielded by Archangel Michael is meant to be the sword of truth, but here we have this distorted version that is distorting truth, that is distorting the masculine energy that I feel is very much anchored in San Miguel, where a lot of that distorted, corrupted masculine energy has been anchored in the heart of Mexico, which, burying the lead here, is the 4D inner earth stargate, according to certain perspectives. So that would correlate to the heart chakra. So that's very interesting. And it's a portal to Giza, which is the 4D stargate. So there's the inner earth and then the regular stargates. For each of these pairings, there's 12. There's the 1D, the 2D, all the way up through 12D. And it was actually in the 12D Stargate that I was also targeted, in Montségur, France. France. So that's the Cathars. That essence is what was targeted. The Grail essence. The Cathars held the Sophianic template, the Grail womb. They held the traditions of the Sophia, the Gnostics. So it all comes together, it all ties together, and that 12D is Christ consciousness. So through the targeting of the Cathars, they really, and that was done by the Holy Roman Empire, by the way, the Crusaders that were targeting those who had this original essence that happened in the south of France. And it was actually in the south of France that I was specifically targeted. She told me that her intuition told her that we had to go on this Mary Magdalene pilgrimage together. Oh my gosh, it's 111 here. I just looked up, and I don't look up that often to see the time, but it is 111, and I cannot tell you the amount of 111s and 1111s and aligned numbers that I have seen on this journey. Even landing in San Miguel, we pulled into gate 111 after I had seen that number numerous times in the day, and I saw 144 multiple times. It was very fascinating. And so here I am speaking about this targeting affirmation. It's the 22nd as well, and 22 is a number of the Magdalene. I actually, just this past weekend, moved through a deep reclamation and process of reclaiming my connection with Mary Magdalene herself, because I actually had lost trust in Mary Magdalene, which is so sad, or I had a bit of a trauma with her because of this person who claimed to be connected to Mary Magdalene and who I went on this Mary Magdalene pilgrimage together with. And it was through Mary Magdalene that this false representation that she embodied, obviously, of Mary Magdalene. It was a true desecration, honestly, of her beauty and her codes that she did this. But she even stole my book that was all about the alchemy of Mary Magdalene. And now I'm blanking on the name, but a very beautiful book that has a lot of potent codes. And so I kind of had this resistance toward connecting with Mary Magdalene myself. And so just this weekend, as I am in San Miguel, I am working on reclaiming Mary Magdalene as one of the Grail Queens, as one of my guides as well. And I feel very connected to a number of the Grail Queens. But with her, I legitimately felt I had a bit of trauma. And so I was connecting with her directly, and it just felt like that completion was really coming to its fullness, where I had to move through that specific process of connecting directly with her after being in Tulum, where I had met that person, and reclaiming the land, reclaiming my experience, putting a capstone of beauty on my experiences in Tulum, because I had resistance toward returning to it. I had resistance and a shadow over my experiences in Tulum. There was a lot of beauty and magic that I experienced, a lot of deep healing, but also a lot of karmic nonsense that I experienced there. And that shadow had kind of overpowered the good and the beauty and the light magic that I had experienced there. And so, full circle, we are coming into this truth that is held within the waters of the womb, that is held within the waters of our cellular memory, that is held within our consciousness, that is held within this Aquarian energy that is helping us to awaken this remembrance within as we begin to disentangle ourselves from the distortions of this old paradigm, of this old matrix of control, where the crystalline energy and the pure crystal Sophianic energies embodied by the angelic humans are being siphoned from. Our life force essence that is pure, that is divine, that is holy. Those of us who are here as guardians and keepers of the truth, the key holders, the healers, we are here to help resurrect the remembrance of the truth, the remembrance and the resurrection of both the Christ and the Sophia. So, with that, I'm hearing a train horn in the background as well. It's almost like, yes, yes, pay attention and remember. I don't know if you can hear that through the mic, because it actually does a pretty good job. So I don't know if you could hear the birds. I don't have my shield around it. There's only so much I could pack, but I just feel like that train horn came at a very poignant time. Yes, pay attention. Beep, beep, wake up. This is what we are here for. This is what we are here to do. So, there is so much more that I could say about the crucifixion of our egos, about the triple Marys, about the Sophia, but we have more episodes. We have infinite episodes ahead. Well, maybe not infinite, but I feel complete here as Holy Week has come to a completion, and it is Earth Day, and it is the 22nd, which is a Magdalene Day. That is the Sophia embodied, connected. Mary Magdalene as the number 22 of union, and Earth Day, remembering that this is our home, that Earth and her Sophianic essence is wanting to be remembered and resurrected and restored to her own holiness. So, to work, if you feel called to work with the grids, to work with the crystalline energy, if you are truly a grid worker, of higher order, working with that heavier energy too, thank you so much, because that is, and I didn't say higher order as like from a hierarchical perspective, but it takes a lot to do that work. It is very intense. And so if you have been working internally doing womb healing, if you feel called to go deeper with this work, thank you. And if you do feel called to go deeper with this work, I am going deeper in the teachings myself. So I have been restructuring so much. And even since I arrived in Mexico, I have been wanting to just completely restructure even what I thought was the restructuring of my back end and my offerings. So for now, I am offering one-on-ones if you feel called to do some of this clearing and template restoration, where we will actually go in and look at your connections with certain lands, as well as just the deeper clearings and template restoration that might be wanting to happen. But also my containers, which I already have so much information in them. If you feel called to go deeper, I encourage you to check out my links below. And there will be updates coming, to be sure, but Luminary is the encompassing, all-inclusive offering. And there is basically everything I learned is going in there, and most of it is already in there. And I've been learning so much more. So there's a lot in there. And then, of course, my book, Let There Be Light, Liberating the Heart of Humanity to Create Heaven on Earth. So depending on where you're at on your journey, if a lot of this is new, this will help to connect even more dots and to give you a taster of how to take the initial steps. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much for being here, onward and upward in love and light, as we journey home to the heart of truth. And I cannot wait to see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for the subscribes and the comments. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon. Thank you for tuning in to the Heart of Truth podcast with your host, Amanda Erin Kelly. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or review on your favorite platform. And if you'd like to go deeper, grab your copy of my book, Let There Be Light, and join us inside the free community in Illumina Wisdom School, where you can access free resources to jumpstart your journey, such as a higher self activation and the Body Temple Blueprint Masterclass, as well as explore the plethora of resources, including Awakening Fundamentals and Luminary, my signature path to wholeness and mastery, to help you become your own healer and sovereign authority. You can access everything at thisartcalledlife.com or find the links down in the show notes below. Until next time, onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth.